I think what we are absolutely all united on, that we want to stop no deal. And I simply say to everyone else, if we want to guarantee that we're staying in Europe at the end of October, the government has to recognise that we have legislation in place through the Ben Act that prohibits us leaving on a no-deal basis at the end of October. I'm making it clear that there is a risk in where we are at the moment. Yes, we've passed the Ben Act. We should celebrate that we've got an Act of Parliament that forbids us leaving. But we have to do everything that we can, and that includes a motion of no confidence, and there is more work to be done on that over the course of the coming days. But we are determined to take our responsibilities. We need to stop Boris Johnson crashing us out. That is their priority. If we want to guarantee that we're staying in Europe at the end of October, if we want to stop this Prime Minister, then we have to stand up and be counted, and that means a motion of no confidence.
I voted to stay. You know, I was more than happy to be British, but with this referendum going on and you've got a choice to, your country's picked to stay in the EU and the other side's picked to go away, you know, it doesn't look, we've not got much of a voice.
Westminster's not a club, it's England is the kind of 90% shareholder with the capital in England, and Scotland is just a sort of little state which occasionally gets listened to.
How is it even remotely plausible to still get away with suggesting Scotland has been ignored, or that Scotland doesn't have a voice when it comes to Brexit? Especially in recent weeks, as the SNP have spearheaded the efforts to fuck up Brexit under the pretense of preventing a no-deal scenario, and using us as their scapegoat while they're at it. Scotland doesn't have a voice, they say. Aye, if you're Scottish and you vote to leave Europe. The SNP are not being ignored in the slightest. The amount of airtime that they get to run their mouths off, and despite the incessant whinging from the confines of their Twitter echo chambers, where they're all convinced that the media is biased and anti-SNP, I'm yet to hear one fucking journalist outline at least one obvious contradictory policy that they've got going for them. Nonetheless, Peter Blackford has appeared on the Politics Live show this afternoon, and it really is remarkable just how full of shit he really is. As the comparisons at the beginning of the video showed, there's a clear difference between the space of 2 days. Is that a memory lapse, or is it just less requirement to be cautious? As this is the second time that he's come out and talked about the Ben Bill being passed, with the intention of stopping us leaving, when he, like the rest of them, have repeatedly justified their actions up until this point as merely preventing no deal. He then goes on to explain that a vote of no confidence could be required if they wish to prevent leaving, when normally he, like the rest of them, have insisted up until this point that would come about if the PM intended to break the law.
Look, we had a majority for the Ben Bill. Those that want to see that extension should have the courage of their convictions to join us and remove this toxic Prime Minister from office. Bring forward a motion of no confidence, and let's agree a unity candidate that could go into administration in number 10 for a time-limited period in order to extend Article 50 and to call an immediate election. That would be real leadership if the opposition parties were prepared to do that.
So why isn't it happening, Ian Blackford? Who's the block on your plan, clear plan, to have a no confidence motion?
Well, we're still talking to the other parties. There are discussions going on this afternoon and tomorrow. But I'm making it clear that there is a risk in where we are at the moment. Yes, we've passed the Ben Act. We should celebrate that we've got an Act of Parliament that forbids us leaving.
In theory, without a deal.
We've got a Prime Minister that's prepared to stop at nothing. And I simply say to everyone else, if we want to guarantee that we're staying in Europe at the end of October...
What a fucking worm. The cat's truly out the bag this time. As I said, is this just a lack of requirement to be cautious now? Or is this merely a memory lapse? Who knows, but it was obvious to any bystanders, or anybody in general really, that paid much attention, that the real reason that the majority of these politicians have gone after no deal and created all the hysteria that they went on to create surrounding it as a means to inevitably fuck up Brexit, as Theresa May did her part, effectively backing us into a corner, with no deal really being the only viable alternative, so they chose to go after that. The cliff edge, catastrophe, yada yada yada, we've heard it all before, but the point remains the same. Just how sincere were those excuses throughout these months, and throughout these weeks especially, as it was the concept of no deal that was the justification for that Ben bill being passed in the first place. And now here we have Chupcakes outright admitting that they want to guarantee that we stay in Europe after the October deadline, or supposed deadline, because in theory Boris Johnson could walk away tomorrow. What an anti-democratic fucking slimeball.
If we want to stop this Prime Minister, then we have to stand up and be counted, and that means a motion of no confidence. That means putting somebody into number 10. Let's control that process and let's make sure we have an election. Let's put the destiny in the hands of the people of the United Kingdom that they...
You all blocked the chance for us to have a say twice, if I'm not mistaken, but yet they sit here after the fact when they know full well that a general election cannot happen until after this so-called deadline. How good of them to now talk about putting the destiny back into the hands of the people, provided they can determine what the questions or the topic will be about. They determine the outcomes of any future Brexit scenario, if any at all. How kind of them.
They can have their say in a general election.
Right, but sources, SNP sources in fact, have said that the discussions that you're talking about have hit something of a roadblock. The other parties are not putting forward a credible plan. They don't agree with your idea of a no-confidence motion now and a caretaker government led by Jeremy Corbyn. What's your response?
Well, we run the risk of closing off the window because we know that the government is going to prorogue Parliament at some point over the next few days ahead of a Queen's speech. We come back in the middle of October. The clock is ticking. A motion of no confidence gives a 14-day period to put in place an alternative administration. So the clock is beginning to run down. And I would simply say to everyone else, woe betide us leaving Boris Johnson there, and he does something which is unpalatable. The voters will extract a heavy price on politicians that failed to show leadership.
And if it wasn't for the fact that this man was blessed by being Scottish, rest assured his political career would be over. But he's somewhat shielded by the fact that he, like the majority of the other SNP Rainbow Unicorn delegates, seem to be treated like demigods up here. Remarkable, really, considering they're full of fucking shit for the most part. Manipulation, deception, lies, bullshit. Communists, progressives, quote unquote. Fucking hell. If he was an English politician, the upcoming general election would be the end of him. I still like to think though that some of these SNP politicians are going to get ousted. That said, there's no viable opposition up here in Scotland. And it's all starting to seem a little bit like the dog and pony show that I believe this whole process is. It's a lot larger than I previously thought. As Ruth Davidson's departure, as well as a lack of centrist or even what I would consider right-wing parties up here in Scotland, the SNP, like they've done for many a year now, are just going to run away with it. They're just going to run away with it again.
So the clock is beginning to run down. And I would simply say to everyone else, woe betide us leaving Boris Johnson there, and he does something which is unpalatable. The voters will extract a heavy price on politicians that failed to show leadership at this time of a constitutional crisis.
Well, the Parliamentary Labour Party is reported to be talking about a referendum first before an election. Do you back that plan?
We've certainly supported a people's vote, but we need to face the reality that trying to put an administration in place for a referendum would be extremely challenging. You'd be talking about a government of unity that would have to be in place for at least 6 months, would have to pass a budget. I don't detect that there's anything like a majority for that in Parliament. The conventional way to deal with this is to have an election. Let's remove Boris Johnson.
To deal with what?
Is to have an election. Let's remove Boris Johnson. Let's put this to the people. Let's make that argument that we should be staying in Europe.
Wow. So in other words, just stop Brexit and proceed to a general election with the intention of convincing enough people to vote for a party who intend to revoke Article 50, or alternatively have a second referendum as a mandate. Make the case for staying in Europe. The case for staying in Europe was put forth before the referendum in 2016, and 17.4 million people voted to leave. including 1 million Scottish voters. But, wow. Fucking wow. You know, the given what you know now routine is what really drives me up the wall about this all. Each and every delay, fuck up, stall, etc., in my opinion, has been meticulously planned out. And the bullshit that we hear 3 years on regarding how devastating leaving would be really just doesn't wash with me. It just pales in significance, realistically, to the fact that the European Union intends to integrate further. Federalisation, removal of nation states, globalisation, sustainable developments, yes, mass migration, removal of armed forces, security services, the removal of veto when it comes to foreign policies. So given what we know now, there's a much more compelling case to get the fuck out of the EU than there is to stay. But that's here nor there. The fact remains the same. What they're advocating for is stopping Brexit in its entirety now. I mean, what skin is it off this little cunt's nose anyway? Pardon my French. I thought they had a mandate for independence. How are you expected to meet the criteria in order for you to call upon a referendum for independence if you go ahead with this? And of course, he has to be centre stage, so it looks like to the whole UK that it's the SNP calling the shots here, pretending that they're doing it on our fucking behalf. Fucking hell, man. Wow.
That the SNP will take their argument to the people of Scotland and that will win their argument. I want the opportunity to remove the Brexiteers that represent the 13 Tory Scottish seats in Scotland. We should be bold enough. We will do our job in Scotland. The opposition elsewhere have to believe that they can do the same.
You need also the support and backing of a number of Tory Remain rebels, and they are considering waiting until next summer for an election. Are you prepared to wait that long?
I've had conversations with people right across party, and I think some of these Conservative MPs recognise the risk, that we've done a lot of the heavy lifting, we've done a lot of hard work. If Boris Johnson remains in office, and if he is determined to ignore the law and crash us out, then it's a question that we might have done all this work, but to what effect? We have to guarantee that we'll not be leaving the European Union. I'm asking everyone to recognise...
See, where was the without a deal at the end of that sentence? See what I'm saying?
The responsibility that they have, that we have to take this Prime Minister out of office. Having passed the Benn Bill, let's finish the job, let's unite together, let's work together, let's end Boris Johnson's days in number 10.
Truly fucking remarkable.